Alan Wake 2 has been a video that I've waited on writing. How do I write a review that accurately translates how narratively rich this game is while also somehow hiding to all of you my complete lack of prose or any journalistic accreditation to review such a game? I feel way in over my head with this review, but in that sense, I feel like just like Alan in Alan Wake 2, so maybe I'm the perfect person to review this game, I don't know. And I know what you're thinking. Isn't this intro a little more meta and fourth wall breaking than usual? Well, yes, dear viewer, and that is because that is what Alan Wake 2 is. This game burns the walls of reality, fiction, video games, live action, and the neurons in my brain that tell me how a game should be made. I have no idea how this game was made. It has one of the most incredible scripts I've ever played through. As someone who loves film and direction, I don't know how they implemented the artistic live action CGI blend in this game, but it's amazing. And as a gamer, I've never played a game with this creatively unique of an identity. So in this review, am I going to be able to give this game its full justice? No, because it's so amazing and incredible, you need to play it. Yes, you, Harold. Because like the best art, when this game's credits rolled, I could feel my brain chemistry being altered. Alan Wake 2 is the most unique and creative game I've ever played, so dim the lights, get your popcorn ready, and welcome to the stage, Alan Wake! Alan Wake 2 is a game that I wouldn't recommend to everyone, but if you want something that is so creative, bizarre, and is going to test you with how confusing and straight up baffling it will get, then you will love this game. Because just like that dance sequence, you are never going to know what this game is going to offer you. Even if you played the previous game, you are going to be confused. And that is so much of the fun of putting this mystery narrative together. The narrative and its multi-layered aspect of reality is what creates this beautiful tapestry of bending reality that the game's identity rests upon. The narrative follows two characters with Saga Anderson and Alan Wake, one in Bright Falls, Washington and the literal world finding real clues surrounding the local cult that is surrounding the town and is somehow related to Alan Wake. Meanwhile, Alan is navigating the hellish landscape of the Dark Place, a corrupted New York City of his own writing that is trying to eat him alive. The fascinating part of this narrative isn't the actual individual narratives, but how these two stories bounce into and bleed into each other, as the lines between reality, fiction, and horror all begin to blend away. This boundary-pushing narrative style of having you play and switch between two protagonists leads to this incredibly unique dynamic of having one character who has more information than another as they try desperately to help save each other. And as the game goes on, we see why they are both so interconnected to each other in this story. Alan Wake 2's narrative is much more character-centered than the first game, with you really getting to know Saga and Alan. You really begin to love them for their individual characteristics because this game focuses on the characters in this game way more, and it's all the better for it. Let's look at Saga first. Saga is a fantastic character. She's the player insert, and she wasn't in the first game, and everything about Bright Falls and Alan Wake is new to her. So if you're hopping into this game, you're going to relate to her a lot. Her strong but kind role of being a detective away from her kid, but having the strength to fight the mental and physical assault Bright Falls has, is inspiring throughout the game. Her rage at Alan throughout the story feels justified, and the struggle of us learning what part of her past is real, as the story Alan writes begins to change details, is one of the most horrifying and cerebral things could happen to a person. Having an omniscient writer bringing your family into a fictional story and putting their lives on the line for the hope of him escaping is such a horrifying concept. And Saga somehow has to stay centered and calm and collected. And that makes her such a unique and interesting character as this lightning rod that is able to hold the narrative down. For a new protagonist, she's absolutely dynamite. You'd think for a new insert character that you would play, it would be hard for them to top their original character of Alan Wake. And yeah, they don't, because Alan's amazing. Name a character that has suffered more than Alan Wake. Oh wait, Alan Wake in the first game is a good character, but Alan Wake 2 fleshes him out into being one of my favorite protagonists in all of video games, because what happens when you leave a struggling author in hell for 13 years? You get this guy. This man has been stuck in the Dark Place for over 13 years, and that horror of this horrifying labyrinth of New York City makes us sympathetic for how desperate he is to escape and write any way out of this story. We understand his mental breakdowns, his struggle to escape, and the horrifying reality of the sinister Mr. Scratch that always seems to be wherever he is trying to go. And there's all these side characters that fold into this narratively expertly as well. You have Agent Casey, the partner to Saga on the outside, who's also a character Alan wrote into the Dark Place. The Costco brothers. No, not the Costco brothers, although I do think they would get along. Quick spoiler, these guys get 5 big boons.
Oh, we're so sorry to hear about your brother that passed away. He gets 5 vehicles. Boom!
And then you have other sinister characters like Mr. Dord, an incredibly charismatic talk show host. You have the old gods of Asgard returning, and somehow all of these characters manage to find a spot in the game, and it never feels overcrowded. And how do all these different tones and voices and characters manage to fit into a game that works together as a horror story? And that is because of the direction of this game. Alan Wake 2 is one of the best directed games that I have ever played because there is a constant vision throughout it. I love Sam Lake. This man's massive forehead is concealing the largest brain in video game storytelling next to Kojima, who's doing 4K renders of Conan O'Brien for Fetus on the Beach 2 or whatever. Unlike most writers, he understands the rules of video games and he knows when it's okay to break them when he's writing. The use of live action scenes integrated into the gameplay is incredible and something I've never seen before. His focus on live action and breaking into that medium isn't new, other games have done that before, but the amount he does in this game is staggering. The production level as well to the live action sequences, the motion capture scenes, even the songs they created for this game alone, shows a dedication and overall vision that blares through so soundly in an industry where most games have nothing to say. And the themes and messages this game shows is through the shift in genre. Alan Wake 2 tonally and story-wise is much darker than the first game as it is full-on horror. It deals with death as a real concept rather than a plot device like in the first game. It looks at depression, schizophrenia, mental health, and the struggles of continuing to find a reason to keep living without just ending it. This game lets us look at the pain of a character like Alan and shows how inspiring it is that he somehow just keeps picking himself up in this endless loop just for the chance to try again. Those mental demons that we have to tackle is a main theme throughout this game. Mr. Scratch is one of the most fascinating villains I've ever seen in a video game because it's a real representation of what Alan is. It shows how the most horrifying and scary thing that can haunt us and ruin our lives is a dark and corrupted version of ourselves that we don't want to acknowledge. Alan Wake 2, by the end of it, left me shook to my core. Its narrative is one that doesn't work on logic, rather emotion. The journey these characters go on from the sunny bright falls to the melancholic and creepy coffee roll to Cauldron Lake to the late night set of Mr. Door, the horrors of what happened in Parliament Tower. This game always had me on the edge of my seat because I cared what happened to these characters. I know that this is a story that could eat them alive, and I know that any of these characters could die. Just like David Lynch stories, the horror doesn't come from the jump scares in this game, it comes from the scenarios we are putting our characters that we love in. Just like Alan says, in a horror story there are only victims and monsters. And this game is a perfect encapsulation of that mantra because I'm a victim of the gameplay. Let's talk about that real quick as well. Alan Wake 2 switched away from the action-focused gameplay of the first game to a more survival horror gameplay, and is way better for that because the gameplay fits the narrative better. I think the gameplay in Alan Wake 2 is a lot better than Alan Wake 1. You have a lot less engagements in this game, you're fighting less enemies, but the fights you do have are more scary and more tense because the enemies are harder and it's harder to survive these encounters. Still though, there are flaws with this game. I hate that when you're full on items, you will just get empty boxes that you could have used later on for ammo. That makes the game unnecessarily hard in some places if you accidentally open up too many boxes. But the worst part of this game, the boss fights. The boss fights are so bad. The boss fights in Alan Wake 2 are Uncharted 2 final boss levels of unpolished. You just wonder how a game so expertly crafted in every other area just kind of gave up when it came to boss fights. Are they better than the first game? Maybe, I don't know. It's better than getting attacked by poles. The bar's low. And it sucks that this is such a flaw of the game because outside of the boss fights, this is like a top 10 game of all time for me. No exaggeration. I've never played a horror game that struck such an emotional chord for me while I was playing it. This is like the shining level of creativity where the narrative is just as good as the horror and it all works together. You know you're doing something right when I finish the game and I'm thinking that the narrative that most resembles this are the masterpieces of David Lynch and the masterpieces of Valve that came before it. Remedy slowly but surely with each game is becoming one of the most premier studios for video game creativity and artistic endeavors. I from now on will always pick up whatever game they put out because they are able to say more in 20 hours than what most games can say in 80 and not a single moment is wasted. And how are they able to do that? Because they pack every scene with a creative idea and everything moves the story forward. I've never played a game like this and you absolutely should, because Alan Wake 2 is the most creative game I've ever played.